Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of AACRAO's Credential Chats. We are joined this week, pretty special first for us. I think this is our first time going outside the practitioner space, outside of the professional organization space, into a vendor in this space. Really excited to be joined this week by Ian Davidson, the Chief Growth Officer at Smart Resume. Ian, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy holidays, everybody. I'm thoroughly in the Christmas spirit, the holiday spirit overall, and glad to be here.
Well, and I'm really excited to have you here because we've been throughout the last couple months really of Acro's Credential Chats having a lot of conversations about what's next. That these credential innovation and learning records, where things are going, is that they get used by a lot more constituents a lot more frequently. And not only are you directly involved in that, but I also think you're really great at talking about and explaining it. And so maybe just as by way of that, a good place to jump in is, folks heard you're with Smart Resume. Does that mean all of our legacy resumes that we're used to are dumb?
You know, I think that it means that they're static, right? A phone was something that you used to communicate, a smart, orally, right? And then over time, as it was becoming smart, you started to text and play snakes, if anybody remembers that fun game. But now phones are unrecognizable. They're computers in our pocket, and they took the concept of the phone and really expanded what that meant. That's what we're thinking about with smart resumes. And really, it's about destroying this idea that a resume has to be one page only because a recruiter only wants to interact with it for on average about 6 seconds, right? Like the reality is the amount of things that happen between someone formulating their resume and using it in a job search and human review, it's a massive gap, right? You've got job boards involved. You've got different types of matching algorithms in those job boards. You've got technologies like Workday and all of those platforms that touch your resume and route it to people and route you to different jobs you should apply for. Those are all really powerful platforms that would frankly much rather be given 50 pages of data than one. So when we say smart, it's about expanding the use cases, filling it full of more data, and having a resume that can do more for your average job seeker.
I had a different question planned there, but based off something you just said, I'm going to jump in with, something that you said kind of, I think, challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom that we're hearing right now. A lot of people who we all respect are still kind of thinking about this. Well, learning records are important, and as we start communicating with them to more people, we need to be careful not to overwhelm them. And I'm hearing you say, well, there's this really big thing called AI that's going to be stepping in between the learner who's sharing those learner records and the hiring manager, admissions officer, whoever it is, who's consuming those learning records, that beforehand there's going to be this intermediary that's not going to be intimidated by too much information in the LER.
That's right. AI can process the internet, right, in seconds. Grains of sand of information are not an issue to AI. And so if we're telling someone you can only provide a page of information about yourself, there's two fundamental challenges. One, you're going to lose a lot of context and a lot of information that good AI, good platforms could leverage to make better recommendations to someone. Another foundational problem is you are putting a lot of pressure on that person to know how to market themselves, to be good at writing resumes, to know what employers want to see, to be able to condense information in thoughtful ways, and to then customize and tailor it so that you're really targeting it to a job. And the reality is that job seekers are starting to use AI to even do that. So, in my opinion, AI has, verifiable credentials, digital badges, they do several things that just make sense for resumes. One, they bring data to the table so that we're not dependent on someone to communicate the value of their education, communicate the value of their experiences, right? We're giving them tools to do that. Two, you're creating trust anchors, right? If 65% of resumes look alike, which is the number we're hearing from employers now in the span of like months since ChatGPT came out, right? How do you know which ones are different? How do you know what to believe? Well, if there's verifiable data anchored on that resume that the AI can train off of, then you can create confidence. So yes, I think verifiable credentials, digital badges, AI and the resume come together really nicely.
And one of the things I'm really excited to dig into, is that you were hinting at there is, the learning records like what are being produced out of, college campuses, and hopefully with leadership and partnership of the Office of the Registrar, is, not just about what's best for employers, that this is really learner-centered stuff, is what I'm hearing, and that there's a whole lot more that's going to come into it than just, applying for jobs. And maybe that's a good segue to, just by way of understanding this whole what next sort of notion within the LER ecosystem, just, how is, a smart resume coming in, what do we need to know as AACRAO members about vendors like you and others that are going to come along in other spaces? Like what is the relationship to a smart resume with learning records?
Yeah, we think every single type of record is going to be valuable to a platform like Smart Resume, right? We're doing away with the one page. And let me be clear, the product that makes it to a human being, that can be a summary that you can drill down and get to. So we're not saying like, oh, the resume is now going to be 10 pages. We're just saying it's going to be dynamic. So in that context, every piece of information has value. Now, what we've been very, very focused on is data integrations and interoperability with the platforms that are being used by college registrars to recognize learning, right? So Canvas Credentials, Credly, Accredible, Certifier, the Trusted Learner Network, Credential Wallets, Territorium, Level Data, like all of these companies that are partnering with higher education institutions to create this verifiable data and equip learners with their records. We're building the integrations at this point, pretty much have them all, so that a learner on our platform can go get all of the data from your institutions and others they've attended from their high school, from maybe even their Cub Scout, app that they use that where they earn their Eagle Scout. So it's the proliferation that makes each piece of data more powerful when you can start to stack it together throughout your lifetime journey. We're pulling all that information in the Smart Resume to make it much more easy for people to build a really powerful and compelling source of data about their capabilities.
And when you are talking about this data and you're talking about trust anchors, so it's, what are some of the things that might be, consumed by a tool like Smart Resume in order to create stuff like you're talking about, these great storytelling devices that help a learner better understand what to see, the awesomeness to see in the mirror, and what's missing from their own reflection that they don't realize, and helping them do that narration storytelling to opportunity providers like admissions counselors and employers. Like, is it, or you mentioned badges, are transcripts a part of this? What kind of data might we be picturing here?
Yeah, so we've partnered with AACRAO on a survey, and we're starting to see what schools are issuing badges from, and you see it from degrees to micro-credentials to certificates to academic honors and achievements. That there is an absolutely a range. I'll give you a few examples. We've partnered with the University of Arkansas system to verify degrees going back to 1990, right? And to give leadership awards in academic honors and even relevant coursework that can create a really rich profile. We're partnering with Arizona State University, where they are actually turning employee reviews into verifiable credentials, right? So they have a standard rubric for all of their student workers on campus. And when people are assessed at a certain skill level, they'll issue that to them as a credential and say, you've demonstrated this in the context of your job on campus. We're in conversations with Ripen, which is a great learning platform that helps people get work-based learning at scale across campuses, where they will be receive credentials representing the employer's review of that project that they did while a student on the campus. And so, yes, transcripts, those are super interesting. We're talking to Amanda Welsh at the Northeastern University. Like, what can we do if you gave us a whole transcript? Could we infer skills and help someone build a skill profile off of that? So there's really like no stone that can't be unturned that can provide insights that we can bring in and then help someone better market themselves.
And for people who don't know, when you say that you're taking something like an employee review or a recommendation letter, I'm guessing this could probably extend to something that's really time consuming, just employment verification. This person did work here between date X and date Y. When you say you're turning that into a verifiable credential, what do people need to understand that means?
Yeah, so let's use the example with the skills. So the employers have a system. I don't know the system well, but to essentially submit their reviews, right? And the ASU has a product called the Trusted Learner Network that they're leveraging and that is available for other schools to participate in that can make the automation of issuing credentials and giving them to students easy to implement. And so those students will receive a credential through this automated process that said, hey, through your work at the university, you have been verified for skill X, right? Active listening was the most recent one that I saw. And so it's got a description. It's a NACE rubric that we use to assess the skill, and it says that this person has been assessed, and we have issued a digital badge for them, showing that they're great at active listening, right? And then those students are invited, when it comes to our part in this, to activate a smart resume that they can then pull those credentials into. And when they do that, now they've got one section of their resume, skills and abilities, with verifiable data already built into it, and then they can build around that.
I'm picturing in my head, Ian, like when you say trust anchors, based off what you just said, that it's moving from a resume that says, "Trust me, Noah, I've done and accomplished these things and have these skills and competencies," to me saying, "Trust me," and also trust my university that they're asserting these things. And because it's a verifiable credential, it's a credential so I could click on and verify that it's not just photoshopped.
Yeah, you're putting your brand on your student's resume with what you're willing to say about them in a way that is immutable. That's exactly right. And imagine that throughout your educational journey, if there's signal from everywhere you went. It's powerful.
And by the way, we should probably, Ian and I have both met, run into each other at the Trusted Learner Network. And full disclosure, I'm on one of the governing board committees for the Trusted Learning Network at Arizona State. So just uh, in case anybody looks that up, and this was completely unplanned that we talked about that, but just want to disclose that. And Ian, maybe a good place in our last couple of minutes together is, you touched on this at the very beginning of just this such a student-centered thing, that this is not just about let's help the like cogs be better for the wheel. I hear you talk about this in a way where we're taking like the credential innovation, the next generation, which is starting now, of credentials, and thinking of new ways of operationalizing them for our learners that they're going to be using early and often in all sorts of different ways that are very much serving them, not just their next hiring manager. What are some of the things that you're seeing or picturing happening?
Well, I'm glad you teed it up because you're going to just hit my personal journey and I'll end on this. But I spent 13 years in advertising, 10 of them working for like deep tech companies that are like harvesting cookies and targeting at banner ads. And you're seeing an ad for something that you were just looking for 35 seconds ago, right? And it's creepy, it's powerful, it's effective, but it's creepy. And it's not a great feeling, as a consumer to feel like that not a lot of consent went into that. I transitioned from there to ZipRecruiter. I wanted to be done with that. When I came into ZipRecruiter, essentially a job post is an ad, right? But at least it's an ad for something that helps you earn money and not spend it. But I was just completely blown away. I was like, cool, marketplace, ads, jobs, mission driven. Why is there no data in this marketplace? There's none, like none. There were job posts and resumes, right? So when I learned by talking to partners in the education space about how not only what digital credentials were, but the philosophy behind the ownership of that data, right? And that it was granted to the student, and they were the only ones who determined where it went and how they used it. To me, it was a double eureka. One, bringing data into ecosystems to help people market their abilities so that they don't have to be good at doing that because most of us aren't. That was a eureka moment. And the second one was data done right, right? So students have to do multiple layers of opt-in to create a smart resume with this data. They can opt out at any point. They can delete the data. They can hide it from their resume. They can use it on different versions of their resume, but they're totally in control. The resume does not reach an employer's hand without their consent, and each individual packet of information follows the same rules. So we call what we do, and it's not just smart resume, but it's this collective movement around learning and employment records. We call it empowerment technology, and I think that's what it is.
I mean, that is just such an amazing place to end because that is just a powerful ending with the empowerment tech and really just helping us in the enrollment management and uh, student record space to be thinking about, the stuff that we're doing is actually really important. That this is not just going to be compliancy work, that we are trusted, verifiable, protected records that learners are going to still be able to own and control and use as currency that opens doors for their successful futures. I just love it. Ian Davidson, Chief Growth Officer at Smart Resume, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this week.
Thanks. Appreciate everyone who's going to see this and everything that you do.
Thank you so much. Have a badge worthy week.